Hi, my name is Frank Schaeffer. I'm a writer, and back in the 70s and 80s was the nepotistic sidekick of my evangelist father, Francis Schaeffer. I grew up in the religious right. I was part of the religious right. I was an activist, and at one time very famous in those circles. I can remember my dad and some other evangelical leaders sending me off as their spokesperson to the Today Show back in those days, hosted by Jane Pauley, to argue that we were being discriminated against because our books were not counted along with the New York Times bestsellers, though our books were principally selling in church basements and Christian bookstores, etc. I can remember leading rallies that picketed abortion clinics. I can remember sitting down with some of the Ford family, Gerald Ford, President Gerald Ford's son, who spent a year in our home. I grew up knowing the evangelist Billy Graham. I know his son Franklin, who is now a religious right leader and perhaps the biggest fan that Donald Trump has in this country. That is my background. I know those folks. I also know that if you had told them that they would ever support a president like Donald Trump, they would have laughed in your face back in the 70s and 80s. Now, I fled that movement, and I ran as far as my legs could carry me, and I became an author and an activist on the liberal side of politics, on the left, on the progressive side. Notwithstanding, I understand those folks, and I still have friends in that community. They would have laughed in your face simply on the basis of his unkindness, of his untruthfulness, of his lies, of his racism. You know, a lot of those white evangelical folks back in those days were racist, but they liked to pretend they weren't. They liked to pretend that the white schools, the private schools, the Christian schools, the homeschooling they did wasn't because they opposed integration. It was just all about quality of education and safety. At least they had the decency to be hypocrites and pretend to be one thing. They never would have had a leader that came out and said the racist things Trump says and still followed him. It would have embarrassed them. They would rather have been hypocrites and to keep some fig leaf of grace over their hatreds of the other, over gay people, over black people, brown people, whoever it might be. Today, the evangelical community follows Donald Trump, and one of the lies he is now telling when cops are ambushed and shot down in cold blood, when people riot and loot and burn neighborhoods, and the reaction after Black Lives Matter takes to the streets got out of hand and cities burned and cops are attacked and so forth and so on, is that he is a president of law and order. This is perhaps the biggest lie he's told, along with his right-wing sidekick, Mike Pence, an evangelical white Christian. I know plenty of people who know him personally, who has been his booster. The lie that Mike Pence told just in a speech within the last 24 hours, the lies Trump tells us saying he's a law and order president, would have had the people back in my day laughing in his face. Clearly, he is a president of disorder and unlawfulness. Every single violent act from the left or the right now is in the context of Donald Trump making things worse, of Donald Trump shilling for and pushing for a race war, of wanting people like that stupid teenager who came out with his gun and shot a couple people to do that, of rejoicing in the fact that a couple of cops are attacked by some brutal thugs who uses the excuse protests against the police, that whole areas of New York City and other cities have been trashed. This is Donald Trump's fondest wish, and his only hope of election is to pass off this lie of coming in as a president of law and order. Every single honest person, and that includes evangelical white voters who supported him in 2016, know that he is a president of disorder and lawlessness, that he has pushed for it and goaded people and stirred things up, calling Nazis very fine people, fighting to keep monuments to slave-owning patriarchs who were traitors to our country and stood against our country, stirring up this stupid idea that somehow the South has a moral victory over the North by waving their Confederate flags. His people coming out in flotillas of boats, dragging their Trump banners through the waters of American ports, standing up for this president, All of them have either bought into or don't care that he is lying about being a president of law and order. Every shot fired, every rubber bullet fired, every journalist who's been beaten up, every woman and man and child thrown to the ground by the cops. I do not just blame the police. And I do not just blame their unions who have spent decades defending police brutality and making sure nobody can get fired. I blame Donald Trump. With Donald Trump out of this picture, with Donald Trump's fakery and lies and hatreds and stirring things up and now trying to cash in on the disorder that he has caused, we would not be in this place. You know, as a father and grandfather, one of the things that I do, and especially since the COVID lockdown, is do the care for my grandchildren, for 3 of my 5 grandchildren, every single day. If I harassed them constantly, mocked them, called them names, sexually molested them, as he has sexually molested people for decades and tried to get away with it, if I changed the rules, if I created disorder around these children, at some point they would act up. And if that happens with kids, if kids long for order, if kids long for patterns of life, if kids long for kindness and love and tolerance and forgiveness, and above all for a grandfather who apologizes when he makes a mistake, when he shouts at them and loses his patience because he's been taking care of them for 12 hours straight during the lockdown, whatever it may be. Children are no different than nations. Human beings, we are all the same. I do not blame the people who have blindly followed him. I blame him. We have to change this president. We have had 4 years of Donald Trump and barely survived. More than 250,000 Americans are dead because of his lies and incompetence over COVID. We have lost the respect of the world. He has lied to us so much about his fake, stupid cures and everything else he's come up with. We no longer even trust our pharmaceutical companies now to come up with an actual vaccine. He has sparked even more a panic among the anti-vaccination folks and so forth and so on. We are spiraling down, and I want to conclude with this. We have barely survived 4 years. We will not survive the next as a nation, as a democracy, as a free people. Even now, as he lies about the election and says that it will be contested because there is so much rigged ballots and mail-in ballots can't be trusted, and he's laying the groundwork for even more disorder. This is no friend of the United States. Donald Trump is an enemy of the American people. He is an enemy of law and order. Those cops who were gunned down should send him the bill. Their families should be justifiably angry with the shooters, but even more angry with the president who has created a climate of violence and disorder in this country that is spiraling down and down and down and threatens to continue after the election. You fools who carry guns to protests on the left or the right, you fools who have allowed yourselves to be stirred up by this man, I pity you, but I do not blame you. I blame that president. He has used his bully pulpit to undo us. We must defeat him. My name is Frank Schaeffer.